Welcome inside the High School OT press box. I am Joel Bryant. We're doing a special episode again today. We're previewing the 3-3-6 in football this season. You guys might recognize the guy on the screen with me, Logan Carter from Game of Inches. Logan's going to be working with us this year, helping us out on Friday nights and going out the games for us and recapping games with us. Logan, for those that may not know you, give yourself kind of a background and kind of how you got into all of this.
Yeah, so I started Game of Inches, a local triad, little marketing company basically for high school sports. When I started it, it wasn't as crazy as it is nowadays with high school, coverage. When I started, it was only local news and you guys. But I just love high school sports. I coached basketball over at East Forsyth with Mike Muse and those guys, and that was freshman year of college. And I just saw a need for more exposure on social media, like you guys. High School OT had dominated the website platform, and I just saw a need to get exposure for kids, and that led to the 10-year monster of Game of Inches for me and my career. So it's always been there, and I finally hung it up. I got married and hopefully starting a family real soon and working on my master's in business. But I love high school sports and still wanted to be involved. So it's a privilege to be with you guys this season.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Logan's one of the most respected people in media in the state. He's very dedicated to high school sports. Good mind, too. He's got a good mind for the game and players as well, and a good instinct for stories as well, which we're excited about. He's got some good stories coming up.
Thank you.
High School T as well. So I do want to get into kind of Forsyth County today and also Davie County. So obviously, the new realignment this year, we have new conferences, new classifications. When realignment was happening, what was your kind of takeaway on what happened with the Forsyth schools? Obviously, the CPC is a little bit different this year. Mount Tabor is now in a different conference, and we have Northwest Guilford in the CPC this year. Just generally speaking, what was your takeaway from realignment?
I was really shocked with Mount Tabor's new realignment. With now we have the Oak Grove Mount Tabor matchup. I really did enjoy for a couple seasons, when we did go down to just the 4 classifications. I did enjoy the rivalry of East Forsyth, Mount Tabor, West Forsyth, Mount Tabor, and I'm glad we're going to get those in non-conference. But it was very nostalgic having those matchups and now seeing everybody kind of separated. It made me sad, but I'm also excited. Like you said, I love stories and I love new rivalries. So now we get to see, some new matchups. And when I was at East Forsyth, you can see my helmet back there. I'm a little biased. But I had Northwest Guilford in our conference and Southwest Guilford back then in 2014, 2015. So I'm excited to see that matchup kind of get going again for Willard and those guys.
And we are going to start with East Forsyth. We're going to start with the Central Piedmont Conference. It's now the Central Piedmont 7A, 8A. Like I mentioned, Northwest Guilford is now in this conference. So they wanted to pair Northwest Guilford, which is an 8A, with the only other 8A in the triad, which is West Forsyth. Because when they did the conferences, we thought we would have the same rules of playoff qualification that we had before. Turns out that's not the case. That's a story for another time. But we also have Reagan, RJ Reynolds, Parkland, East Forsyth as 7As in this conference. I do want to go into East Forsyth because this is a mystery team for me this year. Bryce Baker is at UNC now. He could possibly play at UNC this year. He was an incredible quarterback. They still have some college prospects there. Jair Richburg, the receiver, JB Shabazz, the tackle. But still, I can't get a read on this team. So please take it away, East Forsyth. Can we expect them to be as dominant as they have been lately?
I think this is, like you said, there's so much talent, and it's all going to surround around the quarterback, J.D. Fulp. It's his time to shine. He was behind Rayner, who is now the quarterback at Arkansas State. And then they bring Bryce Baker in, from Walkertown. And as you said, he's now at Chapel Hill. So J.D. Fulp, I've seen him in, some JV games back in the day when they would bring him in, when they were blowing out somebody. I've seen him at some scrimmages here lately, and I think he's definitely improving. But like you said, having guys on, pretty decent O-line and Jair Richburg, he's got some weapons. And I think the running back by committee that Willard has always kind of ran, that's always what East Forsyth's bread and butter has been, having 2 dominant running backs. So you have Cannon Rottweiler returning, and it sounds like they got a transfer from Glenn, Craig McGee. So they're going to have that 1-2 punch as usual. So that'll definitely help him, definitely not have to solely rely on the passing game with him, as we're going to see what he's made of. So I love the week 1 matchup against Glenn, a rivalry game right off the bat between 2 Kernersville schools. And I think that's where we're going to see J.D. Fulp it's his time to shine, and we'll see what he does there. But he's definitely got some weapons, and I think he's going to do just fine for East Forsyth. And as always, they're definitely going to compete in the CPC.
And what's your read on the defense, and as well as, is there, obviously, everyone's going to focus on the quarterback thing, but is there an area on the team where you think they might be improved this year from last year, and it could be the defense?
I think it could be the defense. I think with the two new defensive coordinators that they have, a lot of those guys are my friends. That was a switch from Aaron Bill, who had been there forever. I'm sure a lot of people know that name when they won their 2 state championships. And I think, he retired and resigned, had some kids, wanted to coach, his sons in football. So I think they're finally coming into their place. And through the grapevine, I've heard Tim Devericks, former Davie head coach, is now over there coaching with the defense as well. That's a great get for East Forsyth. So I think we could definitely, I don't know like any star player yet that I know will shine, but I think after going to one of their 7-on-7s, I think they have a good collective bunch on the defense that will probably be better than last year's defense.
Awesome. That's good. That's good to hear. I'm very fascinated to see how they do this year. And the good thing about this stuff is we find out pretty fast. So
Very
they're
quick.
playing some good teams in non-conference, and we'll see exactly what the quarterback situation is looking like and everything. But think about this conference is it's always so competitive. It's kind of like a mini SEC here. So I do want to get your thoughts on all these other teams. So we have, I think, a potential contender in the 8A West and West Forsyth. Northwest Guilford also is going to be a good team this year. Then I think we have another real 7A contender in Reagan. Who do you want to start with?
I'll start with West Forsyth. Seeing Coach Wallace step into that role after Adrian Snow, he's done a phenomenal job. It's been awesome seeing those rivalry games the last couple of seasons. It sounds like they have a 1-2 punch as well over there, which has always been, whether it was Jamani Wilson or whoever it was at running back. That's been their bread and butter as well. So I'm excited to see running back Daryl Page. He's a senior, but he was a dynamic threat out of the backfield last year for them. And it sounds like they have a guy from Lake Norman who's pretty prominent. I didn't, see Lake Norman last year. Yeah, the Moses Morris guy. It sounds like he's pretty phenomenal. So they have such a, fantastic O-line. I think that's going to be, their go-to this year as well. I know that I haven't seen the quarterback play yet at all, but like you said, we'll learn pretty quick with them because they have quite a schedule the first 3 weeks. So we'll learn really quick about the passing game. I know they have Jalen Moore, wide receiver over there. So he's pretty reliable guy for whoever to throw to over there at West Forsyth.
On paper, this team looks pretty imposing. And for those of you who are fans of offensive line play and you're kind of in the area, you have to go see West Forsyth. They have a 4-star PJ Dean and everyone else in that line. It's always such a big line there. Like I feel like they average 300 pounds somehow every year.
every year, I swear. They have guys that are, like you said, this is the SEC of the triad over here, and they're producing some SEC players at West Forsyth on the O-line.
Yeah, and they're not just like big; they're also like good. There's
Athletic.
one thing they're good.
Yeah.
Just a big guy who's playing because he's big. But it's another thing when they're big and talented, which these guys are. What do you make of the defense for West Forsyth?
I think the defense is great as well. I think just the CPC. I think it's either going to be a shootout or a very defensive game, and I think this year, just reviewing everybody and a lot of the returning guys and the younger guys, I think we're going to have a pretty balanced defense across the board for guys like Reagan, West Forsyth, East Forsyth, Northwest Guilford even. I think we're going to see a balance on defense. I don't see any like crazy superstars. Those guys will definitely rise to the top at some point during the season. But I think as of now, just looking at 7-on-7s and stuff, I know you can't see a lot during 7-on-7. We don't have the pads on. But I think it's pretty even across the board of what we're going to see for defense at these schools.
The one guy I want to know their defense is it DeVille Eldridge? Is that how you say his first name?
Yeah.
Is he the last Eldridge? I know there was like a bunch of Eldridges there.
I say that because I after covering these guys for 10 years, I keep seeing lineage of a lot of players. So I don't know. I don't want to say he's the last one, and then 3 years from now we see another one.
Well, this Eldridge had 13 sacks last year as a junior, so expecting him to be kind of forced there as well. Do you want to get into Reagan?
I definitely want to get into Reagan. I know Todd Willard East because I'm such a biased person for East, but I'm very excited about Reagan. I'm really high on Jacob Smith, just what he's done freshman year when he got the starting role, and then sophomore year, he had 14 pass touchdowns, almost 1,500 yards passing. And then last year, it was just detrimental to see him go down in that last game for him in a high, big time matchup with Mooresville. He came in through the game-winning touchdown, finds out he tore his ACL. It's just tragic, but he came in and threw the game-winning touchdown. Reagan had started so high last season, and I was so excited to see them. So now we're going to be able to see him come back onto the field. Talk about a really tough non-conference schedule. McGee has really set himself up to, like, we might not win a couple of these non-conference games, but we're definitely going to be ready for conference. And one of the other players that I'm really biased, Game of Inches, we always try to give out some awards for specific positions over the last 10 years. And the breakout player last year was John Evans, the freshman running back for Reagan. He had 922 rushing yards on just 166 carries with 8 touchdowns. That was a freshman. And this O-line has only gotten better. It's one of the biggest O-lines, I think, in the area for the Triad this year. So I'm really excited to see Jacob playing with him now for a full season, hoping no injuries for the remainder of the year. And then I know you have a guy like Elijah Davis at wide receiver. He holds an offer from Florida State. He led, the Raiders with 33 receptions last season. And I'm just excited to see this group as a whole, and defense as well. Like I said, with West and East, I think they're pretty equaled out on the defensive side as well. So it's going to be awesome to see them, turn it around this year. I know it was some bad luck last year for McGee and those guys. I really appreciate Coach McGee and building a relationship with him all these years. And I'm really rooting for him as well, because he always has such a phenomenal team of offense and defense. And I think sometimes they just can't get over that last hump. But I think this year it's definitely going to be Reagan as a contender. And if it comes down to that, I'm very excited about the Halloween night game, October 31st, between Reagan and East. If it comes down to that, that's going to be quite a game for the state of North Carolina. If it comes down to that week, I'm going to be really excited.
Yeah, that could be a heck of a one. And well, to me, like West Forsyth, they're very involved here too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. After all the years of covering the CPC, like, I'm not trying to, be down on any of the other teams, but it seems like Reagan beats East beats West, and then West beats Reagan. It's like the food chain triangle that always happens. And then there's some kind of three-way tie possibility that's going on every year.
Yeah, that's crazy. We'll talk about Northwest Guilford later with Bryant Roche from Greensboro News and Record, but I do want to talk about these two schools. And here's the funny thing about it. So this conference, the other thing about it is with Parkland and RJ Reynolds, so the so-called bottom of the league is way better than the bottoms of all the other leagues.
Yes.
We've seen here, especially recently, where these schools are, seriously contending with the bigger programs and in some cases actually winning the games. Parkland, RJ Reynolds, they two newer coaches here, Derek Sharp at Parkland and Joe Davidiak at RJ Reynolds. How do you see these two programs progressing this year?
I'm really excited to see Davidiak and them at Reynolds. I was at that game a couple years ago where they beat Mount Tabor when they definitely shouldn't have. And I think you said it best. In most conferences, the bottom of the barrel is really bad sometimes, unfortunately. But here you have two teams that are actually pretty decent, but it's just, as you said, the talent at the top is just unbelievable. But I got to watch Reynolds last year with Elrod at quarterback against Mount Tabor at their place. They had a bunch of young guys. And again, Mount Tabor was a stud team when I watched them last year, we'll get into Mount Tabor and where they're going to be at this season. But, they had a lot of D1 talent going to Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. But I'm excited to see Davidiak and them, especially their new stadium. I think that'll revitalize their football program as well. And Parkland as well. I just get to see these teams when they play the bigger teams. And that's what I'm hoping, by joining you guys, if you guys come and cover a big triad matchup. Now, maybe I'll be able to go and cover the mid-tier games where I can see some of these guys more often. But it is exciting that, you have two new coaches that are really revitalizing the program. Not too long ago, Parkland was really a contender with Samick as head coach, with Kami and Shell and those guys. So there's no reason to think these guys are completely out of it. Any of these schools at any time can be right back up there with the top of the CPC conference.
the thing I always think about, Parkland's track program, like
Unbelievable.
the guys they have in track, like it just makes you think like some of these seasons, these guys are just gonna, be too fast for people on the football field too. So
Yeah, and that's how they were 2 years ago before, remember Riley Horton transferred over
right,
to West
yes,
Forsyth.
yeah.
I mean, he would just throw it up, and you had these guys that were so quick, track
They're
runner
already so
wide
far
receivers.
separated, yeah.
Yeah, completely separated. They have always had guys like maybe Chase Rory. I don't know if you remember that name, but these guys have always been quick for Parkland.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so much talent at both schools because in basketball they're very competitive as well. Throughout my 10 years of covering the Triad.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So again, 1 through 6 in the CPC is just it's ridiculous.
Yeah, unbelievable.
We're
But I'd like to ask you, if you had to put, a prediction at the top, like where would you be at? And I'll kind of tell you mine.
Man,
I know it's tough. It's tough.
I'm actually gonna go with West Forsyth.
Yeah.
I know that the two kids from Lake Norman, the quarterback and the running back, I think fit kind of perfectly into what they already do. I just think as long as there's no injuries, I think they're going to wear on people. And I'm not saying they're going to run away with it, but if there was a close game, I'm picking probably West Forsyth because of the trench play.
Yeah, and I think I'm right there with you. I know all my East people will be upset. Like I really do think it's between Reagan and West, and seeing what's going to happen in that game. But I think you're right between the offensive lines. I know Reagan has a great offensive line as well, but I think having, again, that 1-2 punch at running back and having the guy from Lake Norman now that really fits into Wallace's system, I think they could definitely wear and tear a defense pretty quickly by halftime, and they'll kind of be pretty defeated, and pretty worn out going into that second half. So I'm right there with you. I'd say 1 is West Forsyth, 2 is Reagan, and 3 is East Forsyth. But like I said, anything can happen in the CPC where everybody beats everybody and we have no clue who's going to be at the top.
Now, here's a question for you, and this is a hard one. Which one is more, considering their classifications, which one do you think is more likely to break through to a state championship? Because West Forsyth has to deal with West Charlotte and Huff and Mount Creek, but Reagan or East Forsyth has to deal with Grimsley and Weddington. If you had to pick now, like which one's most likely to get to one just based on the classification?
I think, like you said, West Forsyth definitely has the talent all over the place, and they've just never been able to get over that hump. Man, it is a tough question. I sit here and think about it because I always get upset when we have to go down there and play the Charlotte schools because it seems like the only person that's got over that hump is Grimsley. And East did it, in the previous classification when they won their 2 state championships. But I think definitely man, that's a tough question. I think Reagan could, because Grimsley, they're very talented, but not as talented as they were in the past. They still have some stud players over there. That they could easily win it all again if they wanted to, without a doubt. But Weddington's defense is tough, so that's the hard part. Grimsley and Weddington's defense is so tough. I think they're a level above all of the defenses. Like I was saying, it's pretty even across the CPC. Weddington's defense, West Charlotte's defense, all those defenses are such a step ahead of all the defenses in the CPC. And I think that's where it comes into play. Like, I just don't know if they can get over that hump because they have not seen defenses like that all season. But again, it's good that, East has scheduled Grimsley, West has scheduled Grimsley, so they can get a look at a pretty high level defense before the playoffs, before they're anywhere close to that.
And the good news is we don't know how the brackets are going to shape up. Like, there could be a situation where those Charlotte teams just be up on each other, then you only have to beat one of them in the end, or we don't know how it's going to go. But I do think all 3 of these teams have a pretty legitimate shot at making it.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it's all going to depend on how that bracket shakes out, because that was a huge component of East Forsyth's 2 state championships. They beat good teams, but, a lot of the Charlotte teams on the other side really, beat themselves up those 2 years that they made it to the title. And not to, short their state championships, but it's just all about how the bracket lays out for guys.
Yeah, I agree. Let's flip over to this new Piedmont Triad 5A, 6A. So this conference has Atkins, North Davidson, North Forsyth, Oak Grove as 5As, then Glenn and Mount Tabor as 6As. So Glenn and Mount Tabor are coming down from the old CPC into this conference, which is kind of a mixture of a bunch of different conferences because Atkins was in the old Mid-State 3A.
Yeah,
it's kind of a big collage of stuff. North Forsyth used to be in the Mid-State 2A, I believe. So
yeah, the 2A.
Multiple conferences involved here. When this one was first formed, what was your first reaction?
I, this is going to sound terrible, but this is a lot of teams that have struggled over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first saw this conference, and I hope this motivates anybody that's in this conference, I've always spoken honestly whenever I'm on a camera. It's just right now it's Mount Tabor and Oak Grove, and just off of recent history. But I hope some of these schools can start to step up where it's not going to just be these same two schools battling it out for the next couple of years. Mount Tabor and Oak Grove has had shared success in their respective conferences. But I hope to see schools like Atkins and Glenn and those guys now being in this conference away from the East Forsyth, away from tougher teams that they were playing in their previous conferences. I hope they can kind of rise to the top. But as for this year, I think it's definitely going to be Mount Tabor, Oak Grove, unless one of these teams just has a bunch of sleeper guys we don't know about. Athletic guys that can win these games. Because not to say that Mount Tabor and Oak Grove are like, crazy good this year, because they've lost a lot. We could start with Mount Tabor. They've lost Jadon Blair going to Notre Dame, Snook Peterkin going to Virginia Tech. That's two huge guys on your offense and defense. The running back Williams at Oak Grove, they lost him. That was a prominent guy. So this might be a year for one of these teams, to get upset in this new conference. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this conference is definitely going to shape out over the next couple of months.
Which direction are you leaning towards between Oak Grove and Mount Tabor?
I think I'm going to lean Mount Tabor. I'm really excited to see Tyshawn Brown, Coach Tyshawn Brown's son. That's going to be the new starting quarterback, Kingston Brown. He went 7-3 on JV, but he's really athletic and just really smart with the ball. When I watched him on JV, I went and saw him, at a 7-on-7 that Mount Tabor hosted. Definitely some nerves, and that's to be expected, especially when you're the coach's son and your dad makes you the starter. That's a huge step where a lot of eyeballs are going to be on you. But it'd be better if he was stepping into the quarterback position, having Jadon Blair or Snook Peterkin to throw the ball to.
Right.
But he does have some reliable guys. Mafuth, he's a guy that plays both football and basketball. He's probably their leading receiver from last year. I think he had maybe 4 or 5 touchdowns for them. And they have another guy, Angelo Moreno, and I think he scored maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns last year as well. So he definitely has some guys, some athletic guys to throw the ball to. Definitely have a couple guys by committee for running back. But again, just like with the East Forsyth, predicament at quarterback, you have a young guy, and unfortunately the quarterback position, it impacts a lot of the other areas on offense and defense, because if you have 3 and outs real quick, you're putting strain on your defense. So it's a huge position to fill, but I'm hoping to see him really shine and finally, get into his mold and just really shine in that conference.
So this might sound kind of like hot takey, what I'm about to say, but sometimes I wonder if you're a team like Mount Tabor the last few years and you have these 2 star players who you need to get the ball to and you really want to feature, sometimes it feels like to me that you kind of get out of what you want your actual system to be on offense. So I kind of think like there's a reality here in which Mount Tabor doesn't really lose much of a step on offense, because Tyshawn Brown can just kind of go back to doing, how he'd want to play in offense, how he'd want to design offense. Because there were times when I was watching them where it felt like they were kind of forcing the ball to those 2 guys on deep shots when might not have had the kind of talent maybe at quarterback to get it there accurately, and when they're kind of double covered and stuff downfield, it's still hard for a 4-star to beat double coverage sometimes. So that's just kind of like a hot takey kind of thing that I have. So I don't know.
I agree completely with that though, because Tyshawn has had success in the past with, not having anywhere close to the talent that he had, with Snook and Jadon on offense. And I think, Lane, there was a lot of Lane Albright, who was the quarterback for them the last 2 seasons. I think absolutely you're forcing it to those 2 guys. You got 2 huge towers and that are towering over a lot of guys that can go up and get a jump ball. Whereas now Tyshawn and his son can go back into the offense that he ran when he won, the state championship during COVID. A lot of screen passes. You got athletic guys. You have a mobile quarterback that can run. So I think you're dead on with that hot take. I think we're going to see Tyshawn and how smart he is on offense. I mean, he's always a gambler. Love when he runs fake punts and everything, but he's such a phenomenal coach on play calling. So I'm excited to see that with his son, especially building that relationship as well. I think, a lot of people, will kind of, poop on that, but I think you have such a strong relationship with your son, and of course, there'll be arguments as well. But
Right.
I think when you have your son and you have that relationship, a healthy relationship, you can really call some plays that are really going to work, and you go back to the nitty gritty that had won you a lot of games in the past.
And with all that said, I'm picking Oak Grove over Mount Tabor. I love that defense they have over there. Bradley Bird, that linebacker, won
Unbelievable.
Defensive Player of the Year in their previous conference as a freshman and sophomore, and he's going to be a junior this year. His numbers are insane. Daniel Honeycutt's a really good kind of rusher of the passer, and Latham Pruitt as well is back. Their three best players on defense are back, and that's going to be a good sign for me. And the quarterback, Grayson Treadway, don't ask him to do too much passing wise, but he was super efficient last year. 12 touchdowns, 1 interception. So I do like this Oak Grove team. I'll kind of lean them this year, and then I think maybe next year is where I see kind of Mount Tabor kind of really getting back on top of things.
Yeah, but I love their defense. Like you said, Bradley Bird, he was our freshman breakout player of the year 2 years ago for the Game of Inches Awards, and the guy was just unbelievable. Every game we went to, it seemed like he was on every single play on the defensive side of the ball. Wherever there was a tackle, he was right there getting that tackle. So like you said, yeah, it's definitely going to be a taunting task when Mount Tabor goes up against them in that defense. That'll probably be the best defense that they see all year in the conference. And the only reason I'm leaning Mount Tabor is because I do like their non-conference schedule.
Mm-hmm.
They may lose out a couple of those games. Playing Reagan, West, really tough games. But I think that preps you, where these defenses are, Power 5 school offers to a lot of these guys. And now you're going to switch over to a conference. So it's definitely murky water. Like, I agree. I could agree with you, but, I think Mount Tabor's non-conference schedule will get him ready for the conference schedule.
I think Oak Grove is playing Reagan, but I think there's a couple other games against some smaller classification teams than Mount Tabor's playing. So I think that's a good point there. Other notes in this conference. So Adkins, they lost their best player they had in a while, Garrison Dibble, who was like an incredible sack machine there. So they're going to replace him on defense. It's good for Oak Grove to have North Davis in this conference. So they do bring a rival with them.
Yeah, it's always a great game.
Forsyth, some Forsyth County team, so it's good to have the rival with them. North Forsyth, not really sure what to expect from the Vikings. I know that this is one of the programs where in Forsyth County with the school choice, this is a school that's been losing some players in recent years. Do you have any other small notes before we move on?
Yeah, I think that is a huge note to talk about with a lot of these teams with the open school enrollment and stuff. With Forsyth County, that's kind of why you see the top to bottom ratio with a lot of these players. So I think until we kind of see a grasp on that with, Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools athletic program and their take on that over the next couple of years, because these are schools that used to be really good in all sports. I mean, just 10 years ago, North Forsyth is competing at the local Frank Spencer holiday tournament for basketball. And now, they're a program that, is just slept on heavily just because of that open enrollment aspect that you're talking about. So I'm interested to see how this conference shapes out with where kids transfer and if they want to stay in these these conferences that you can actually potentially win. You're not going up against these big time schools. I know you want to play up to your level, but sometimes I think kids need to pay attention to how much playing time you can get as well. And showcasing your talent at some of these smaller conferences, and then eventually you could transfer. But I think, with these smaller schools, I hope to see a lot of kids doing that where, it's just like college. We're starting to see that at the high school level, where you start out at a small school, you dominate, and then, you're transferring to a major school in the higher classification. So I think for those schools, that's the case for them.
And that Forsyth County transfer talk leads us into Walkertown and Carver and 3A, 4A, 5A. So Walkertown's a 3A in this conference. The only 5A in this conference is Rockingham County, and Carver's a 4A, but they're mixed with Moorhead and Reedsville. So Walkertown, they had a very good season last year under Coach Honeycutt, and they have added a lot of talent this offseason. And the thing is, the 3A classification, it's kind of open to me. I know Shelby's down there and whatnot, but
Yeah.
the 3A classification is kind of open to me. Your thoughts on Walkertown, and do you think this is a state title contender in 3A?
I think they very well could be. Honeycutt and them, they really impressed me last year. We went and made our game of the week for Game of Inches, Walkertown versus Reedsville. Walkertown was leading that game at halftime. Reedsville was exploding at halftime as a team on the sideline. And I was
What
like,
is going
wow.
on?
I was like, wow. So like Walkertown, like I was really impressed. I think they had some quarterback struggles last year because that's what ended up happening in the second half. And Deontay and Kendre did, what they do. And that offense and the running back last year. But I am excited. I think, with their quarterback situation, there was a senior at West Forsyth that, didn't have a lot of playing time behind Riley Horton last year because they all transferred in at the same time last year. But he was a sophomore at Glenn the previous year. And he threw for, I think, about 1,700 yards, I believe, when I was looking at his stats when he was at Glenn. So he's a good quarterback. And I think now they finally have somebody that can throw the ball and move the ball around more efficiently. They have a wide receiver, Hunter Cruz. He was solid at West Forsyth as well. So you have him transferring in. Hopefully they had some, relationship, with throwing over at West Forsyth during practice and camp before transferring over to Walkertown. So I'm excited to see with all these people that they have. I think that was the biggest missing piece last year after watching them for 2 games. Not to say that their quarterback, was terrible or anything, but it's just there was definitely a lack of the air game because the run game was fantastic last year. We all know that. But it's going to be exciting to see Honeycutt and them kind of open up the passing game a little bit to take off, some of the pressure from the run game and take some pressure off the defense because that was a huge component of that Reedsville game where they were so close to winning that game. But because of the second half, quick 3 and outs, Reedsville is right back in the game when you have talent like that on the other side. But like you said, I think Walkertown, I looked at that entire classification. And like you said, like Shelby's up there, but Walkertown could very well be in the top 3, top 4. No question.
I agree. And look, the transfer thing in Forsyth County goes both ways. This is a school that lost Bryce Baker to East Forsyth. Yeah. So it's not like this is all like a one directional thing.
Yeah.
It's very nuanced of what's going on in that county. Do you have any notes on Carver before we move on?
I don't really have any notes on Carver. I haven't covered them in the recent history, so I don't want to say anything just because I haven't seen those guys yet.
Totally fair. I know Leon Moore there. He's a dedicated Carver guy. He was on some of those really good teams they had in the 90s. So he's trying to build that program back up to what it used to be. One more school to talk about, and it's not Forsyth County school, but they are kind of adjacent to Forsyth County, which is Davie County, that high school. So they were in the CPC during the past cycles here, but now they're back into this North Piedmont 6A, 7A conference. So Davie is a 7A. They're contending with Lake Norman, Mooresville, South Iredell in 7A. There's also 6A Statesville, North Iredell in that conference as well. Davie has a new coach in Brian Hinson, who was a state champion head coach at Salisbury. Did a good job with Wes Cabarrus when he went over there, and now he's at Davie County. I just want to get your take on this school because you know them pretty well.
Yeah, so Davie has always been one of my favorites to cover. They were always the sleeper in the CPC. And I think that's the same way with them this season in that new conference. They definitely have some big-time schools just like they faced in the CPC. But they were always right there. They would either beat East Forsyth or beat West Forsyth. There were several years where Devericks, the previous coach, he was right there with those top teams. And I think Hinson is a fantastic coach as well, where he can be up there with the Lake Norman and them. Biggest thing in that conference, you got a lot of traveling on Friday nights, and that's a huge component in that conference. But I'm excited to see Drayton Nance, the quarterback. I don't know if you remember him from last year.
He was a freshman, right?
Yeah, freshman. And he's a sophomore this year, but I think it was his first start last year against North Davidson. He set like the school record for 5 touchdowns, 450 yards out of nowhere. So I'm excited to see him. And a guy that I've covered for the last 4 years is Ethan Driver, the wide receiver. I'm sure a lot of people remember that name. Him and Gray Deal a couple years ago in that wide receiving group. He's just fantastic. He's only 6'2", 175 pounds, but the guy can make unbelievable catches. He had, I think, over 8 touchdowns last year and close to 1,000 yards. And that was a down season for them with a freshman quarterback. So I'm excited to see his senior season and seeing Drayton Nance after a full season of varsity football as a freshman. I think they could definitely contend in that conference and be kind of in the middle of the pack or close to the top with those top tier schools in that conference.
Yeah, Ethan Driver is one of those guys where in the jump balls he just always gets that
Unbelievable.
I don't know how he does it, but he's always coming down with the ball and contested catches. He's just one of those guys that just has a knack for it.
Yeah, because they were one of those schools 2 years ago when Reagan was supposed to be really good, East was supposed to be really good, West was supposed to be really good, and they came out of nowhere with Gray Deal. I don't know if you remember that wide receiver making one-handed catches. I mean, it was just an unbelievable season for those guys, and that was just in the short past because now Ethan Driver's a senior. But they've always had talent up at Davie County. They have such a huge pool to grab players from up there, huge area. All of Davie County. So they're always contenders in a lot of sports.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very fascinated to see what Hinson does there, especially this year. Coming off that 3-win season last year, I could definitely see that number improving this year for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Logan, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on today. And again, Logan is now a HighSchoolOT contributor. He's going to be going out to games for us, writing stories for us, doing highlights and just kind of doing what he has been doing. Just for us, he does a great job out in that area. He's a loyal high school sports aficionado and follower, and really just a storyteller of high school sports. And Logan, before we go here, where can people find you? And again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, so I guess that'll be the new thing. So instead of finding me at Game of Inches, I'll probably change over my X profile to Logan Carter, HighSchoolOT contributor. So I'll probably get that going where I'll be updating games and whatnot. Once the season starts next Friday. So I'm excited for this new chapter of high school sports. I've always admired you guys. You guys have always been top tier and always respected you guys, just your grind and effort. And I'm excited to help you guys really come and push into this area because I know what long nights are for a lot of us when we were traveling to these games. So yes. I'm excited to work with you guys, and it's going to be a fantastic season.
Awesome. Well, Logan, I appreciate it again. And next up on the show, Deana King from ncpreps.com joins us. And now we're joined by Deana King. Deana is a legend in this space. She's been covering high school football for years and years and years. Deana, for those that, I assume that everyone knows you that's watching this, but for those that may not know you, kind of give yourself a little bit of a background and kind of like your origin into covering all this stuff.
Well, I've, like you said, I've covered high school sports for, I'm going to tell my age here, almost pushing about 30 years now. I'm from Hamptonville, North Carolina. Went to Starmount High School, played 3 sports there. Went on to play college basketball and volleyball at Wingate University, and always been involved in sports. Just had a love for high school football, became the statistician for Starmount in 1995 and has basically been there since. Loved high school football. Was fascinated with Arnold Solomon, who was the founder of NC Preps, what I run right now. He sent out a newsletter every week, and a lot of old timers probably remember that and everything. But as time and technology converted like a lot of print stuff to online, and so I'm at NC Preps. We just this year signed a new deal with a new network. We're still with Rivals, but it's Rivals on 3, so we're excited about this new venture and bring a lot of high school sports coverage to North Carolina. And just wanted to thank you for inviting me on here. You guys at HighSchoolOT do an outstanding job as well, covering the state and all the sports.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you guys were able to hang on there. I was kind of concerned when I first saw that deal happen, but I'm glad that y'all landed there and everything's running. It looks pretty good over there at that site now. So again, NC Preps is where you can find Deana's work. What kind of things people expect from NC Preps this fall?
Well, I've added Trey Scott, who is based in Eastern North Carolina, and over the years, a lot of people have especially on our message board, think that it's a Western based site, because a lot of the posters are and members are from the central part of the state and the western part of the state. We do have a large contingent from the eastern. So North Carolina, as you know, is a huge state. So Trey's going to be really concentrating on the eastern side of the state for us. Brandon P., who has worked with me before, he's going to be down in the Charlotte area, and I'm going to probably do a lot of the western part, and statewide as well. But right now, that's what we got going on. Be it games, doing some rankings, doing what we usually do every fall. It seems like, bringing you the best that we can of high school football.
Awesome. So Deana King again here to join us. We're going to talk about the Mountain Valley 2A, 3A, 4A conference and the Northwest 3A, 4A conference. But before we get into that specifically, I want to get your thoughts on realignment and how it kind of shook out, and were you kind of satisfied with the conferences that end up being in your area?
Well, as a statewide perception, I thought that realignment should have taken place, because you got so much growth in North Carolina. It's a fast growing state, and you look at the lower end and the higher, well, maybe not those terms, the smaller schools and the bigger schools. That's where the most discrepancies are with school size, because I'm throwing out examples. I don't know these schools' exact ADMs, but like, let's say in Myers Park, 4A school, Myers Park, in the LICE classification, with 3,000 students playing against Richmond County, who has maybe 17 or 18. They're more than double the size of that school. And then on the lower end, you have like some of the Smoky Mountain schools with 200 and 300 students playing as, a school with 800, 900. So I think there was a need for, extra classes. I'm not really sure 8 was in my personal opinion. I thought, they could have done 6 with those 2 examples I provided, because everybody else is kind of in the middle. They're all similar. So,
right.
But I think there was, and it's going to be interesting with 8 state champions and how the High School Athletic Association decides to where they're going to play them, and the days that they're going to play them, and who goes where. I'm an old timer, so I remember the days when I don't really care where they played. If they played them all in one venue, where people like me and you that cover all the schools, not just a certain school or a certain area could go and watch them all. Now we had to pick and choose, especially if my situation, you guys are big operations, but when it was just me, I had to make a decision. Do I only want to go to Wake Forest for these games, or do I go to State or Chapel Hill? And so I think it's going to be cool to see what they end up doing that. And as for Star Mount, I know our area was one of the main topics that came up in these realignment meetings. But as far as Star Mount, they didn't care where they went. They were good no matter. They just got to the point where, hey, just put us in a conference and we're going to play whoever was in our conference. We didn't have a preference to go to the Mountain Valley 2A, 3A, or 4A, or the Northwest 3A and 4A. We had relationships with all that. Coach Josh, you had 2 or 3 different schedules lined up, and so we were just glad it was over, to be honest.
Yeah, it got to the point where it's just like, all right, just let us make our schedule. Let's get it over with. Let's get to the fall. And but I do kind of like the one that they came up with. So the Mountain Valley 2A, 3A, 4A that has Allegheny, East Wilkes, Elkin, and Starmount in 2A. The 3As are North Wilkes and West Wilkes, and then 2 4As, Ashe County and Wilkes Central. Obviously, some good natural rivalries in this conference. What was your first takeaway when you saw this group finalized?
Well, this was an old conference that we had been members before, the Mountain Valley, for several years, and had relationships with all those schools. And like I said, we're familiar with all those schools. That the travel is not that bad. I think everybody is right there together. So, there's not going to be a lot of missed class time, especially for the sports like volleyball, tennis, soccer, like that. I mean, I'm talking fall wise, but the travel, I think maybe we're the farthest west in that, and farthest east in that conference, and Ashe County obviously the farthest west. And Starmount can just get on 77, go straight down 421, and be up in West Jefferson in about an hour. So considering some of the other school systems in North Carolina, and our travel time ain't that bad for our conference.
Yeah, I agree. So, football wise, considering that there's 3 classes in this conference, this might be the only conference where there's 3 classes where I kind of think that the favorites are in the smallest class. So I do think Starmount and East Wilkes are probably going to be vying for the title here. If you disagree, let me know. But I'm just kind of curious if you think it's coming down to that, and just what kind of that could shape up to be.
Yeah, when that come out, I heard that a lot. Like they were like, well, the 2A part may show the bigger boys who's the champ football wise. But yeah, I think Starmount and East Wilkes are the favorite just based on what they have coming back. You have teams like Ashe County that can throw challenges to the other schools because just the type of the offense they run. Mm-hmm. And Wilkes Central's a big question mark. You never know. Wilkes Central has always had great athletes, and you just don't know what Wilkes Central will come up with. They Allegheny should have a good team. They had a good year last year as well. Mm-hmm. So but I just still think it's going to come down to that Starmount East Wilkes matchup at Starmount in September. It was a good game last year, and so good atmosphere. And like I said, both teams have several returners coming back from those teams from last year.
What do you think is the biggest area of potential growth for both teams? Obviously, no team is perfect. So coming from last year, what's some things that they were trying to get better at this offseason?
Are you asking like for East Wilkes and Star?
Yes, man.
East Wilkes, they ran the ball really good last year. I mean, I got to give Coach Travis Walker a lot of credit. He ran that system really well, and he gave us some fits over there at that game. Their quarterback, of course, Phoenix Blackburn, he graduated, but they had a very solid JV squad. I think us, East Wilkes, and Mount Airy all were like tri-champs. So they got a lot of good young talent coming up. They've got speed in the backfield. They got several those guys that were track champions. I think it was a relay team that won a state championship. So they got those guys in the skill positions. Got the Guestford kid who's he's a really beast. I've watched him at a scrimmage earlier last week. So, but yeah, that they're going to be very good. As for Starmount, got to replace a lot of great skill people that we had, but got a lot of good returning linemen on both sides of the ball. The defensive front seven is going to be really good. Coach Purdue stated the other days, and I agree with him, had some outstanding seniors coming back, but we are very junior dominated. We'll have breaking in a new quarterback Deuce Bess, he's a junior. He led the JV's team, like I said, to a tri-championship. I believe he scored around 50 touchdowns last year on JV. We got Jameer Billups back in the backfield, leading rusher. Sam Shore on the line, Corey Armstrong on the line, Cody Hernandez, and Kevin Probst. We got 3 returning all-conference linebackers. So defense is going to be really, really good for Starmount. So, but like I said, there it's going to be a good matchup when these two. And the key for everybody is being healthy.
Yes. Yeah. Especially, in these lower classification teams, we were talking about how, some of the schools have 3,000 kids. Not the case at some of these schools here, like Star Mountain and East Wilkes and all of them, because you lose one kid, there might not be, a serviceable kid behind them. It's just the way it is, in the lower population school. Star Mountain is the defense is very encouraging, but the funny thing is, they're gonna be tested really early, so you have against Mount Airy, then East Surrey, then the county rival Forbush, which has a new coach this year. How excited are you for these first few weeks here in non-conference, and just how much of a thrill is it going to be?
Yeah, we'll start out with Mount Airy, which if Mount Airy is not in our conference, we always start off the year with Mount Airy. So it's a great test, great early test for both schools, good competition, good gates. And, this is a school that we have played ever since Starmount opened in basically 1967. Of course, Mount Airy's always been a traditional power, and we took a lot of lumps early in the year, but when B.W. Holt came to Starmount, that tide kind of changed, and I think the overall record is in Mount Airy's favor due to their success the last 6 or 7 years. They've been really good, and they've went ahead of Starmount. Probably I have the record somewhere in my notes, but it's like don't hold me to this. Maybe like a 33-27 advantage kind of for Mount Airy due to them being really, really good the last 2 or 3, 4 years with their state championship runs. So, and then you talk about East Surrey, which that's a team we got back on the schedule. We hadn't played them since I believe in about 5 years. So, and that's going to be an interesting matchup with both brother versus brother, Josh Purdue versus Caleb Purdue. So family bragging rights there. So, and that's a good gate too. I mean, and that goes back to this realignment thing. The goal was cut down travel and bring in good gates for, your natural rivals and stuff. And we would play them too. They were automatic on our schedule in case they wasn't in our league, and we were put in their league at one time. But that's those 2 games are good to open up with.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned the Purdue's and Allegheny with Bennett, and it reminds me, this whole area over the past 3 years. I think Travis Walker as well. There's been a lot of head coaching changes, and the crazy thing is, it seems like every single school has done a good job with their hire. All these new coaches in this area seem to be pretty successful. They seem to know, what they're doing and have things kind of tightened up. What do you kind of make of that? Just all the coaching changes over the past 3 years and how they've been able to really,
find
good people to lead these programs.
Yeah, last year it was like
the
old Northwest, because you had Purdue first year at Starmount, Mount Airy. Mount Airy had their new coach. Elkin had their new coach. Allegheny had their new coach. South Stokes had their new. I believe Jamie Fortner and Travis Walker were the 2 that had been longest, and then so coaching turnover always happens, but it just seemed like it was everybody had to learn new things for everywhere up here in the old Northwest. And in the new conference, I guess Brian Hampton has the most seniority
Right.
in
Yeah.
this new conference.
Yeah. Yeah. And Wilkes Central, they brought Chuck Cannon back a couple years ago too. So Hampton definitely is the long tenured guy. And then I guess it would be Woteki at this point at North Wilkes,
Yeah, at North
second.
Wilkes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's still interesting to me. Like it seems like every new hire this area does it ends up working out. So that's a good thing. Well, let's switch over to the Northwest 3A 4A. This one, this one is just this one's gonna be crazy. So we have East Surrey and Mount Airy and Surrey Central in 3A, and then Forbush, North Surrey, and West Oaks in 4A. We've already kind of mentioned East Surrey and Mount Airy a little bit, but Surrey Central, they brought in Coach Fortner, who you just mentioned this offseason. He's a widely well-regarded coach in that area for what he was able to do with kind of not too much help where he was before. Then also, 4A, we have Forbush, North Surrey, and West Oaks. When this one was formed, what was your reaction?
Well, it was like this whole area got chopped in half.
Yeah.
Because Forbush was with the Mountain Valley, and then it was like crazy. So Forbush got moved to the Surrey and the Stoke with West Oaks. So, like I said, that made logical sense because of travel times, because Forbush is more east. It would have put more travel if they would left with like Aish and the Wilkes School. So you can be from Forbush to West Oaks in probably 20 minutes. Mount Airy's not a far trip. Surrey Central. Like Coach Trent Lohman said when they had West Oaks paired up with Aish, he's like, we'll be going by 2 or 3 schools that we should be playing.
Right.
Like Surrey Central, East Surrey, and Mount Airy. So that kind of made logical sense too, geographic and school size and everything. And like the other conference, I think it's a good conference. It's a good athletic conference.
And for anyone that might be watching from maybe the eastern part of the state that has never really been to this area, and Deana, you can test this as well. These are not straight shot roads either. These are hilly roads. They're winding around mountains and foots, and they're not easy trips either. So what do you think might be a short kind of travel in the east is not really the same up in the Northwest.
Yeah, when you have to go to places like West Jefferson, Aish, Sparta for Allegheny, when the Stokes schools were with us, North Stokes and South Stokes, there wasn't really a direct way for anybody to go to those schools. But we're fortunate to have Interstate 77, 421. I don't know what they end up calling that road, 73 or 74, which used to be 52 when you can get to Mount Airy and East Surrey and West Oaks and North Surrey very quickly. But yeah, it's a rural area. It's called the foothills. So you're going to go around some hills and hollows and curves and stuff. And you may have to go a little extra mile to go get you a burger at McDonald's or Wendy's. But community support up in these areas are great. Football is it's like Friday Night Lights, everybody comes out and supports their team. All these schools have good fan support, good administration, good coaches, and good players. So it's a great place to come watch some football.
Yeah, totally agree. That some of the best games I've been up to is up there, and seeing those crowds it's pretty impressive how the whole kind of town just kind of like shuts down for it. It's very cool. So football wise, who was your favorite in this conference? I think that personally, I kind of lean towards Mount Airy, but I think I still think East Surrey and West Oaks and maybe even North Surrey can contend. Are you agreeing with me there?
Yeah, I with what Mount Airy has coming back, Tayshawn, you start with Tayshawn Martin, who's probably one of the best running backs in the state.
Yeah.
He had a really good year last year. I mean, I know them getting beat in the playoffs, it's kind of probably fueled him to get back Mount Airy to that, that deep run and get to a championship. They have DJ Joyce back, he's just a beast on defense. He almost kind of unblockable, but they got that third Floyd that just stops at the middle. It's just Mount Airy's got a really good defense, got some good linebackers. As far as offensively, they got some key newcomers and coming, that will be with Mount Airy. But, I think they got that horse in Tayshawn Martin back there, and they're gonna have to need him to really help get them going and stuff. And Mount Airy's Mount Airy. They're going to be good. They're going to be in the playoff and the championship hunt come during November, December. West Oaks, Coach Lohman has got a good group. I was over at a scrimmage Friday, and they look really good. They got a lot of good young talent in that program, and Coach Lohman has done well wherever. I mean, he did really well at East Surrey, and he's doing that at West Oaks, and they should. I mean, it's no given that Mount Airy, because West Oaks surely has the talent that they can and the coaching to beat them. East Surrey, as I mentioned before, with Caleb Purdue, he's got maybe the toughest schedule maybe in this area for the small schools, playing schools like Statesville and Murphy, and he's got us on the non-conference. So it's going to be interesting for East Surrey, and I'm sure Caleb's going to do well there, and I'm looking forward to that matchup week 2 over at Starmount, because it's going to be special, because Caleb and Josh both are Starmount alums, and they both were Josh was a member of the 98 state champion team, and Caleb came along a little later, but he was a ball boy. But we're going to dedicate the field for our late coach Joe Hutchins, who passed away earlier in January this year. We're going to dedicate that field that night when East Surrey comes to Starmount. So it's a little special with both of them being Ram alumni too. So, but back to the North Surrey, they have some key players back for Coach Smith. And so those 4 teams, they can play ball. It's going to be interested, what that final order comes out. And then the 2 other schools, Surrey Central, Forbush, new coaches, with Jamie Fortner at Surrey Central coming over there. I saw them at scrimmage. He's trying to, add on to what Coach Southern did at Surrey Central. They had a really good team last year, a good year, but he lost. I mean, they graduated a lot, so he's building from scratch. And first year you gotta get your kids to buy into what you're doing. And at Forbush, Logan Holder, Holder, the last name Holder is Kelly Holder's son. And we all know what Kelly Holder did at Mount Airy, and one of the best coaches that they've had up there. And so Logan's got his first head coaching job at Forbush, and going to try to elevate the Falcons on the football field, and so implement his systems and stuff. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm going to be interested to see that matchup when Forbush and Surrey Central plays. That's the battle of the new coaches.
There's reason for optimism for all 6 of these teams. This is probably, among all the 3A, 4A conferences in the state, this one's probably the best. in terms of the ones that have these two classifications in them. Yeah, I honestly have no idea how this one's going to end up order wise. I think Mount Airy is going to win it, but I don't know, and I also don't know between East Surrey and West Stokes.
Like I said before, injuries.
Yeah.
Especially in small schools, one injury to a key player can change everything with a team. Maybe at a 8A or 7A, 6A, you have really good players all up and down the roster, but if you have that key player, you might not have that player and may have to shuffle your whole team around to compensate for that loss of player. So staying healthy is going to be key for all teams.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. And then one more thing before we go here, I do want to mention North Stokes and South Stokes were kind of moved into a different conference. So North Stokes is 1A in this new realignment, and South Stokes is 2A. And they're in this conference called the Greater Triad 1A, 2A, which might be the widest spanning conference of all the new conferences. So they're playing Chatham Central, College Prep and Leadership, which is a charter school that's starting up football in Guilford County. They have South Davidson, Winston-Salem Prep, obviously from Forsyth County, Bishop McGinnis from Forsyth County. So this is going to be a bit more travel for them, but I also kind of think it's going to be a little bit more competitive for them. Do you agree with that?
With North Stokes, you feel for them. They always have numbers issues, and you got to, like you said, you give Coach Fortner credit for doing the best he could with what he had. Coach Bulletin's over there going to try to do the best he can with what he has over there in North Stokes. But like you mentioned, the trips from Danbury to Denton and to Bear Creek is going to be interesting because, you talk about you're going on a field trip on those trips, because if nobody's ever been to Danbury or Walnut Cove, you're in for a lot of scenic territory. I'll just put it mildly.
Yeah, and obviously the thing that kind of worries me is the other sports, right, where they play 24 games. It's like girls' tennis and whatnot, where you're going to have to travel to these places at least once every year. Football, it's going to be every other year you have to travel. Well, I guess you have to come back from JV too, but
it spans such a big area from Stokes County through Forsyth. You have your Winston-Salem Prep and Bishop, and then down to Davidson County, and then Chatham County. And who was the other team? It was at North Carolina
College
Leadership.
Yeah, it's a charter school from Guilford County.
Yeah. So, it spans a big area, and Friday nights are not that bad, but the weekly travel for the volleyball and the tennis and the soccer teams,
golf,
that's going to be tough on them. So, but competitive wise, that conference is wide open. I think I still think Bishop McGinnis might be. If I was picking a team right now, I would pick Bishop McGinnis in that football league. With they got a new coach this year that's come down from up north, has come in and going to try to keep on with what Coach Holcomb did at Bishop. So, going to be interesting there too.
That was an interesting hire because Coach McMullen, the new Bishop coach, came from kind of a similar school, I believe, up in Delaware where it was. So it's an easy transition for him coming to Bishop McGinnis. And I want to mention South Stokes as well. They're in year 2 under Coach Mickey, so just another school where they're changing coaches recently. Awesome. Well, Deana, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on here and sharing your knowledge about this area. I'm so excited for football to be back. Done with kind of all the preseason talk. Just kind of want to see the games and see the results. And again, where can people find you and find your work?
Well, we're on the On3 network, so you go to On3 and look up ncpreps.com. I'm on Twitter at ncpreps. As I mentioned before, follow me, follow Trey Scott. And I think his handle is at Trey Scott _NC, I believe. And then Brandon P will be in Charlotte. So, but like I said before, thank you for having me. And, I love talking about football. I mean, I could talk football all day, every day if I could. So, but as I mentioned before we came on air, in football, the first games are here when you get all kinds of requests to be on podcasts.
Right. Yeah.
So I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck to you on coverage. I'm sure y'all will be putting miles and miles and miles on y'all's vehicles.
Yes, ma'am, we will.
And hey, I invite you to come up to Star Mountain one day. Maybe for a good game. Maybe in the playoffs or something, or that East Wilkes game.
That's the one. That's the one I was going to tell you. I was thinking about that one because I'd like to come back up there, and it's always a good time seeing Star Mountain, seeing you up there too. So that might be the one that I come out to. So I'll let you know when I make my way over there.
Okay. Thanks again, Joel.
And now we're joined by Bryant Roche of the Greensboro News and Record. He does a great job covering high school sports out in Guilford County and the surrounding areas. Bryant, how excited are you for this season, and how much of an adjustment this offseason was it for you with all the new classifications and new conferences?
First, just starting off, Joel, thank you, and the good folks at High School Overtime for having me on today. And, to answer your question, it's been interesting. I think for me, it didn't feel as dramatic because I have worked in other states where I have experienced, 7 or 8 classifications. So I think for me, that aspect wasn't as, dramatic as one might think. But, just kind of getting used to certain teams being sorted with certain teams and some other changes. I think this summer, a lot of my time was put into compiling our area all quarter century team. So that really, that was probably the biggest thing this summer that was different from years past. I really enjoyed that project and researching, the players and coaches from the past 25 years. But, we're getting into it now. We've already, we've done some football preseason content. We've gotten, I feel like, hit the ground running pretty well with volleyball the first couple weeks with that. So, but it's just crazy to believe that fall is already here and we're just 2 days away from that first Friday. So,
yeah, it's crazy. Where are you planning to be on Friday?
So I'm going to be at Grimsley versus West Charlotte.
Okay, you're going to the big one. All right.
Between, over at the Panther Stadium. So I'll be in Charlotte. So it'll be actually my first time, not in Charlotte, but my first time at that stadium. So I look forward to it. Yeah.
All right, Bryant, let's talk about the first conference that is involved with your area. And that's going to be the Central Piedmont 7A, 8A. So in the past, this conference had been mostly Forsyth County schools and Davie County as well. But now Northwest Guilford joins this conference. There's a whole backstory to how this conference came about. I'm just curious about, how does Northwest Guilford as a football program fit into this conference when you have these programs like East Forsyth, West Forsyth, and Reagan, which are all going to be very good this year. How do you see Northwest Guilford fitting into that league?
It's kind of interesting. It's sort of it's an interesting dynamic because Northwest is familiar yet unfamiliar with the teams that are involved. They have played some of these teams in the past. They had a series with Reynolds recently. The last couple of years, they did a home and home with Reynolds, for example. So I think there is some familiarity. One of the prominent assistants, I will say, on Northwest, a guy by the name of Aldine Payne, a former Glenn head coach who was on the Northwest staff, So I'm kind of interested to see if he might give a little insight in terms of the league. Like I said, he's a former Glenn head coach that, is on the Northwest staff as an assistant. In terms of what Northwest has coming back, I think the strong point for them could be their offensive line. They've got a wide receiver in Rakeem Hammock, who last year had a pretty productive season despite dealing with a nagging hamstring injury. He returns healthy. They might even use him at defensive back a little bit. In my opinion, Austin Jackson, safety for them, is one of the best all-around defensive backs in the area. He is a 4-2-5 safety, so he's going to come up and run support quite a bit in addition to coverage duties. Physical player. He's kind of a rover, like I said, a rover 4-2-5 type for them. They're also going to have Robert Lange, who's a 4-star edge defender, who last year, I think, coming off a switch from Southwest Guilford, made the transition from, a 3-man front to a 4-man front. Now he's got year two in the system, as more of a true defensive end versus at Southwest. He was kind of one of those hybrid types. So they've got that going for them. I think the biggest question mark for their football team is the quarterback position. Last year, it was primarily Anders Mitchell, who has been competing with Farrell Price for the job here, or I should say Price has been competing with him, however you want to put it. Chris Rusevich, the head coach at Northwest, did make it sound like Anders will probably get the lean on being an incumbent starter, but we'll see how that goes. In terms of the teams that they'll be confronted with, I saw East Forsyth the other day play in the Reedsville Jamboree event. I think overall they like what they have coming back. They've got 6 or 7 starters on each side of the ball returning, and they will, obviously they lose Bryce Baker, who is going to be difficult for anybody to replace, being a guy that I've actually heard might contend for playing time at North Carolina as a true freshman, just what I've heard from some people. And so that's a big shoe, but I mean, they like JD Pulp, who's going to get the time as the starter. He's a 4-year kid at East, so he's been in the system. He's going to have a good wide receiver and NC State recruit, Jair Richburg. And, of course, the guy that might show up on your screen, might pop up the most, is their left tackle, J.D. Shabazz. Now, if you have not seen this kid, he's a big boy at left tackle, and he's going to be playing at Tennessee next fall. So those are probably the biggest bright spots for East Forsyth. I think a team to watch for, I really think, in my mind, a team you can't sleep on for me is Reagan. They went 2-0 to start the year last year. After that, their starting quarterback, NC State commit, Jacob Smith, was out the rest of the season with a torn ACL. He comes back, one of the best quarterbacks from this general triad region. Additionally, that offensive line was young before, but now they've all grown up. And from what I've heard, it might be the best all-around, top to bottom, as a unit, offensive line that Josh McGee has had. They also bring back John Evans Jr., who last year rushed for over 900 yards as a freshman. He's now a sophomore. So he comes back. So they should have a pretty good balance offensively. I think another team that is probably the biggest challenge for Northwest is probably West Forsyth. They should be strong, big up front. They've always been known to have some big boys, but they bring back another talented group there on the offensive and defensive lines. I think my biggest question might be what the running back position looks like with C.J. Blevins, who led the conference in rushing last year, transferring to Western Guilford for this upcoming season. So I think that might be my unknown with them, in addition to, possibly what they have at the quarterback spot.
Yeah.
Although they did get a transfer
They
in
actually
from
brought
Lake
in
Norman. Yeah.
They actually brought in
Yeah.
both the Lake Norman quarterback and the Lake Norman running back. So the running back Moses Miller will be taking the reins there in that backfield for the most part, I think. I did want to shift over to Reedsville. You mentioned Reedsville playing East Forsyth and their jamboree. What was your impression of Reedsville and the new quarterback Braxton Johnson?
I think you saw a mix of what he can do, and also you saw the inexperience at the same time. I think I'm curious to see what happens, because I think honestly today, if you ask me, are they better off with him at quarterback or are they better off with Deontay Neal? Just being honest with you, it looked like they were probably better off with Deontay Neal. Now, I don't know what that learning curve could be like down the road throughout this season, but I think you do take a gamble starting a sophomore that has never started before at the varsity level, and a guy in Neal who did what he did last year. I understand that Neal provides a weapon for you at wide receiver that obviously they're trying to fill with the departure of Cameron Jones. But I think right now, if you want my opinion about who gives them the best chance to win right now, it's hard for me not to say Deontay Neal, if you want my honest opinion.
Okay, that's good information. That's a good perspective, because it's easy to assume that the sophomore is just going to be great all of a sudden, but a lot of times there is a learning curve to it, especially for a team like Reedsville that we expect to be seriously competing for a 4A state championship. It might make you think twice about that decision there. What percent would you put on Reedsville's chances of getting back to the state championship and winning it this year, if you had to come up with a number?
Man, coming up with a number. Man, gosh. Strong. I mean, I think if you ask me, the teams that probably have the best chance of reaching a state championship from this area, I think I'd say Grimsley 1, and I might say Reedsville 2.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of, if you take into account each classification, what they look like, I think I'd probably say Grimsley 1 and probably Reedsville 2, I think, if that helps you.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. Well, I do want to get into Grimsley. So the new Metro 6A 7A conference, it's a lot different than how it used to be. So first thing is Dudley is on this conference, so we're actually going to see Grimsley and Dudley play. Probably would like to have seen that game last year when Dudley was a little bit stronger last year, but is what is this point. What's your big kind of takeaway from this conference, where we have Ben L. Smith, Dudley, Ragsdale, Western Guilford in 6A, and then Grimsley, Page, and Southwest Guilford in 7A?
The biggest takeaway in terms of what we're looking at, or the biggest takeaway in terms of how they got brought together?
So the first thing that kind of popped into your mind football-wise when you started digesting this league?
The first thing,
For me,
I
it's
think
for me it's
the first thing that came to my mind was that the rivalries are
yeah, that's
together,
exactly what I was gonna say.
which I think was probably one of the best victories in terms of this realignment. Was that you're gonna have Grimsley and Page together, you're gonna have Dudley and Smith together, you're gonna have Ragsdale and Southwest Guilford together. So that worked out pretty neatly in terms of that. I know in a different conference, or I shall say in different conferences, obviously there was a couple others that maybe got cut off from each other, mainly referencing Northern and Northwest Guilford. But other than that, the rivalries throughout the area I felt were pretty well maintained. I know before somebody jumps on me, I do know that Northern and Northwest do play against each other in a non-conference game before somebody jumps on me.
Okay.
But I think that was the first thing, was that those rivalries are together. The second one, as you alluded to a little bit before, the fact that Grimsley and Dudley are in the same league. They haven't played each other in several years, but now will. And with that said, you have all four Greensboro Classic City schools all in the same conference. For those, in a broader audience, I'm referring to Grimsley, Dudley, Smith, and Page. Those were the traditional schools, four schools that were considered city schools. There are other schools that were formerly referred to as county schools. In more recent years, they combined the school districts. But anyway, if someone from Greensboro refers to a Classic Four, also the teams that were involved in the old Little Four Invitational, that's what we're referencing.
Gotcha.
There you go. Yep.
So getting into Grimsley a little bit. Obviously, everyone watching this knows the basics of the team. It's Faison Brandon, number one player in the country. It's the 4A defending state champion. It's all this stuff. It's all the receivers are back. But what's one thing about Grimsley that you think might be less obvious for our audience? Something that is kind of under the radar that you're paying attention to for this team this year?
I think the most under the radar thing is probably what's generally the most under the radar thing. This offensive line is going to be good. They've got 4 Division I offered kids on that offensive line. And additionally, DJ Howerton, a tight end, is a valuable blocker in this system. And I think sometimes the tight ends aren't thought of as blockers as much as they used to be. But I'm telling you, in this system, Howerton definitely is a factor from a blocking perspective. So I think that's probably the thing that people may not think about, but I'm going to tell you that this offensive line is going to be very strong this year. And I know the running back position, people might be thinking about, what are they going to do without Mitchell Summers? But I'm here to tell you that Ty Shoemake is the next one. And he's already got offers from Virginia Tech, Gardner Webb, others interested. Last year, I saw glimpses of him, mainly in blowout situations. He's only a sophomore, but he's 6 foot, 210, can run around. He's not going to look like Mitchell Summers from a physical standpoint, what he looks like, but I'm here to tell you he's going to be another good one, and he's got a great front to run behind. Maybe as good a front as Grimsley has had in the past. I mean, I hate to be too bold here, but might be the best offensive line that Darryl Brown's had since he's gone to Grimsley. I mean, seriously, it might be.
Wow, that's high praise. Certainly. They certainly on paper. I mean, talking about 4 Division I guys, it's hard to beat. Do you see any reality in which this team loses a game in conference play?
I think it's really hard to think that they're going to lose. I mean, anything can happen, obviously, but I think on paper, I don't know that I see. I mean, I'm not the dude that comes on with bold statements for the sake of bold statements, but I really and truly believe that Grimsley, if they play up to their ability, they should go undefeated and they should win another state championship. I really believe that.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that West Charlotte game is going to be a struggle. I think that West Charlotte's going to be very good. But in terms of 7A, I can't imagine anyone topping Grimsley this year. I do want to get some notes from you on the rest of the teams in this conference. It's not just Grimsley in this conference. Do you have any quick notes on Smith, Dudley, Ragsdale? You mentioned how Western has the former West Forsyth running back CJ Blevins. That's a good pickup for them. And then Page and Southwest Guilford. Do you have any other quick notes on all these teams?
I think the team that's going to be the most improved, possibly this whole entire triad, is going to be Page.
Mm-hmm.
That's my bold prediction, if you will. Page, I think, is going to be the most improved team. They had a lot of freshmen and sophomores that they relied on last year. Those kids all grow up. And when I say that, they had a starting freshman at quarterback, a starting freshman at running back as their main ball carrier. A lot of other young talent between Zion Malloy, who's got now several Division I offers now, Kasai Poindexter, a quality receiver who had a big touchdown against West Forsyth in the Jamboree exhibition the other day. So I think that Page is going to be the most improved team. I think possibly in this whole triad, they could sneak up on people. My other thought is that I think Dudley is going to be better than people think. I think Grimsley is going to be tough. I know they start the season with a pretty big challenge in Cardinal Gibbons in the first game, but I think overall they're going to be better than people think they are. So that's my thought for a few of those teams. I think Ragsdale is going to be better. I know last year they, had went back and forth between quarterbacks a little bit, but I think they're going to have more of an identity this year. They're not last year. They relied on Fabian Diggs a lot, who graduated. He was a running back that was a second team all area selection last year, but they do have, 4 or 5 running backs. They're going to have kind of a running back by committee situation there. But I think overall, Ragsdale is going to improve. The rest of the conference, I mean, Western, I'm going to say Western is no longer a pushover. I mean, for years they struggled mightily, but they're in a tough league. But I think that after watching what they did last year, and you talk about a running back in Timothy Baker who returns, quarterback Caleb Moore that returns, and we already mentioned CJ Blevins, joining. So I think that team, they're not going to be one of those guaranteed wins anymore. So I think, Southwest, they have a new coach in Kirkley Russell. I've heard good things about him so far. We'll see how much of a jump they can make after last year, just in year one. But I have heard good things about him from a couple sources. So, I think that is probably my summary at the moment in terms of that conference as we speak. Okay. Smith, I know I didn't really get into Smith much. I think Paris Baxter did a good job at Northeast last year as an interim. I think it was a situation where, he didn't really deserve to be gone, so to speak. I mean, I hope I phrased that correctly, but I think he did do a good job. as the interim. I know they went with Antonio Hall, but I don't think that Baxter did a bad job, and I think he was deserving of a permanent head coaching position. He got that at Smith, and he's going to have to build that thing up as well. Might be a similar situation with Southwest, where in year one we'll see how much they can possibly do, but I think that they did make a good coaching hire, though.
Yeah, I agree with you. So Bryant, what other big conference in your area? That's the new TAC 6, 5A, 6A. I think it stands for Triad Area Athletic Conference. I'm just assuming they never really told me what it was stood for. The 5As are Northeast Guilford, who we just mentioned, that hired Coach Hall. Then Southern Guilford also in 5A. And 6A is Asheboro, is coming up from Randolph County, Eastern Guilford, Northern Guilford, and Southeast Guilford. So it's basically another Guilford conference plus Asheboro. What's your thoughts on this league in football?
I think the top dog is Northern, and I think throughout this state, if you wanted to ask me the teams that benefited the most from realignment, I think Northern Guilford has to rank highly. They were on the lower spectrum in terms of enrollment during the previous cycle. They only had about 1,300 kids playing in the 4A classification in the old system. Now they're a 6A team who no longer is on the lower end of enrollment. So, and I think football might have been one of the sports that got most affected by that dynamic. Remember, last year they were undefeated until they played Grimsley, and the only other loss that they had was against Weddington late in the playoffs. So I think they return a lot of the guys that were key players for them last year. Remember that the whole entire playoffs, Jackson Kemp, their starting quarterback, was injured and didn't play because of that broken clavicle that he took late in the game against Grimsley. So they have him back. They have Amari Akers back at running back, a really good center in Sam Bagley. One of my favorite linebackers in this area, Chance Cruz, Noah Smith, another first-team all-area linebacker, Bobby Baugh, a good defensive back. I think they're going to be a very strong team, and I really think that they're going to be dangerous. So I would say Northern is my pick to win the league.
Okay. I have one note on Northern Guilford, and so there's a lot of reasons to believe in them. You got into all those reasons: quarterback, running back, linebackers. All these guys are back. They were on the smaller side of their conference last year, but the one thing that I look at, and it's really hard to avoid this, last year's 6-0 in one-score games. That is not normal. That's not normal, and usually that kind of thing, just the way football works, the way the ball bounces, usually that kind of thing doesn't stay consistent year to year. So one thing I'll say about them is they prefer to stay out of those close games this year if they can. They'd like to be ahead probably going into the fourth quarter in some cases, because like I said, in football, if you can only test fate so much, and the ball's gonna start bouncing different ways, and weird penalty stuff can happen. So that's the one thing I would say about Northern Guilford, is that 6-0 record last year in one-score games.
Normally, I agree with that, but my one contention is that they don't have to play the teams that they were in close games with. Remember that last year they beat Eastern Guilford handily, who is in this league now. Remember that, like I said earlier, Grimsley, they, was the only real – Grimsley and Weddington were the only teams that handled them last year. And obviously Grimsley they don't have to deal with this year, and Weddington they wouldn't have to deal with until possibly later in the playoffs or whatever. So I feel pretty good.
Weddington's 7A as well, so they'll clear Weddington as
no
well.
Weddington, yeah, no Grimsley or Weddington.
Yeah,
and so I mean, I feel pretty good about them winning this league with that setup. I really do.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's totally fair. So I want to get your thoughts on Northeast Guilford because obviously they bring over Coach Hall, who had prolific offenses at Dudley, and some players that have come over to Northeast Guilford as well, including the quarterback Quez Crawford. Do you think this is a team that could quickly, uh, quickly improve, even though they're already good?
Yes, I do. I mean, last year, I mean, obviously they made the playoffs last year, so it's not like we're talking about this awful football team
Right.
last year, but I do think that they are going to be better. I do think that Antonio Hall is one of the best offensive minds in the area, and you combine that with Jaquez Crawford, who I ranked him as the second best quarterback from the area coming back, and they also have Aaron Tate, who's a very good receiver for them. So I think that combination is going to be dangerous. A transfer that I think maybe is not getting enough attention, Rayshawn Wilson, remember the name, running back who was originally at Smith. He transferred to Dudley, kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. But as the leading running back for Northeast, he won't have to contend with that anymore. Watch for Rayshawn Wilson to get more carries, more production, and in my mind, one of the probably underrated transfer acquisitions of this offseason, in my opinion.
Good call. Good call. That's a very good point because I remember when he was at Smith, Smith was talking about him a lot. We have this Russian running back. Rayshawn is coming in, then he goes to Dudley, and you're right, he's kind of got lost in the shuffle there. So that's a very good call by you. Now that he's at Northeast, do you any other notes on the rest of the teams in this conference? Because the thing is, as far as the rest of the teams in the conference go, I feel like all of them are on the right trajectory from where they were coming from. I do think all these coaches are doing a good job from when they took it over to where it is now. What are your thoughts on the rest of these teams?
I do think that out of all the teams that are like associated with Guilford County or the Greensboro area, I do think that this one is going to be the most competitive, just week in and week out competition where you don't necessarily know who's going to win on a particular week. I think this is the one that wins that award for me. In terms of what these teams having back, we talked about Northern a good bit. We talked about Northeast Guilford a little bit. Southeast Guilford, they returned 9 starters on defense. I think that's going to be the strongest thing. If you have a strong defense, it can keep you in games.
Right.
Even if you don't necessarily win, a strong defense can keep you in games. So watch out for that. The question mark, I think, for Southeast is replacing quarterback Alexander Marsh. That's probably the biggest unknown is replacing the quarterback, and does their offense have enough firepower to compete with the upper echelon of teams? Eastern should be pretty strong. Just a quick dive, in my opinion. Can they replace Stephen Murray, a guy that went to Rutgers? He was kind of a do-it-all guy for them. So I'm kind of wondering what happens there. But I think the offensive line should be – it was kind of young last year, but they should be better. They've also got a pretty good running game. So I think they should be a pretty balanced attack offensively. So Eastern, I definitely could see them sneaking up on somebody if somebody takes them for granted. Southern Guilford, they're in year 2 under Coach Garrett Mills. I think they will be better than what they have been. I think, they might still be some room for growth there. So I'm not quite ready to put the Storm up with those other teams. Ashboro, I'm kind of curious about. They've made the playoffs. in the past, although I know the biggest area interaction that I recall was Dudley kind of handling them in the playoffs recently. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens there. I know they're coached by Daryl Brown's brother, and
Yep.
been told that he does a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't actually seen Ashboro physically myself, but that's kind of the rub on them. I've heard they're pretty well coached. They're going to be kind of the outsider coming in, but we'll see what happens with that.
My one note for Ashboro was they had a freshman running back last year, Connor Britton, who rushed for over 1,000 yards as a freshman, which is always hard to do. So excited to see what he does as a sophomore this year. I think Coach Brown has that program going in the right direction. Well, Bryant, I do have a heart out here, so I want to thank you for coming on and talking up, the 336, your area in Guilford County. Bryant does a great job out at the Greensboro News and Record, and also with the Winston-Salem. What's that other one called, Bryant?
Winston-Salem Journal. Yep.
Bryant, one more time, can you give people kind of directions on where to find your work and where to find you on social media?
All right. So my name is Bryant Roche, and write for both the News and Record and the Winston-Salem Journal. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter, at BRoche Sports. And in terms of my content, you can find it on either Greensboro.com or JournalNow.com. I would say with the addition of Mark Pruitt, I've for the most part in the Journal, you're probably going to primarily see me maybe once or twice a week in the Journal, every day in the News and Record between Guilford County and Rockingham County content and North Carolina A&T coverage.
Awesome. Well, Brian, I appreciate it again. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to hearing from you and to see your coverage this year.
All right, Mr. Bryant, thank you again for having me on, and good luck to you as we get going on this season.
And now we're joined by Aikman Chambers from the Blue Ridge Football Podcast. Aikman's going to be helping us out this year, going to some games for us and giving us some recaps and post-game show hits and some interviews from the games as well. So glad to have you on. Aikman is from Wilkes County, so he specializes in that area, but he really has good knowledge of this entire area of the 336 that we're talking about today, which is the whole kind of northwestern portion of North Carolina. Aikman, before we get going, where can people find you and find your work at?
Yeah, man, I appreciate the chance to help you out this year. Looking forward to another great year of high school football. Always fun this time of year. You can follow me on Twitter at Radio Guy AC. Also, you can follow the Blue Ridge Football Podcast on Facebook as well. I've got a page set up this year where I'll be doing stuff with work there, all the episodes there, and you can just search for the podcast on Google and literally find it just about anywhere you can find a podcast.
Awesome. So we're going to mostly talk about the Mountain Valley 2A, 3A, 4A. We mentioned this conference some with Deana earlier, but Aikman has a real good knowledge of these Wilkes County schools, which I really want to get into. So first of all, when this conference kind of was reestablished during the appeals process, what was your kind of thoughts? It has Allegheny, East Wilkes, Elkin, Starmount in 2A, North Wilkes, West Wilkes in 3A, and Ashe County, Wilkes Central in 4A. What was your main takeaway when this kind of arrived after a lot of, protests from some of these schools?
Well, it's funny because I was talking to a lot of various coaches from around the area here back when all that was going on. And the common theme, which I think is what a lot of us thought, was this conference just makes too much sense to not be the way to go. I mean, you have West Wilkes, you have North Wilkes, you have Wilkes Central, you have East Wilkes. There's 4 of the schools inside of one county line. You add Elkin, where the Wilkes County line just ends a couple blocks up from Elkin High School, not to mention Allegheny and Ashe and Starmount in there as well. When the conference was the way it was the last 4 years, if you look at the Foothills 2A conference, so if you kind of pinpoint in on West, Wilkes Central, North Wilkes, they're driving by East Wilkes, Elkin, some of these conference schools to go play conference games, and they were non-conference. It just didn't make a lot of sense in the grand scheme of things. And budget and gate played a role in this too, because I know the schools in Wilkes County were shelling out a lot of money in travel expenses, and kids were losing out on valuable classroom time because when you have say a Tuesday night baseball game where Wilkes Central, West Wilkes, or North Wilkes is having to go to East Surrey, for instance, and play a Tuesday night baseball game, they're having to leave school early, not to mention if the game runs long in the varsity game after the JV game gets done, then you're having to, you're getting in late where it's sometimes midnight even on Wednesday morning or after, not to mention Wilkes County schools start at 7:45 a.m. So you're having the kids with a very quick turnaround to get back in and be focused for the start of class the next day. This just made sense to go back to the Mountain Valley in the grand scheme of things. It made the most sense to include Allegheny and Ashe County, and they were vocal in the process about being on board. I think it was technically adopted as West Wilkes' proposal back at the meetings is how it was kind of read and went down. But it just makes sense to have these schools together in this league, because traditionally this has always been a fun league with a lot of teams that look similar to each other. They're close. Everybody's a rival with somebody or multiple people in this league. It's just a lot of fun. And honestly, it goes beyond football. There's great baseball games. There's great softball games, great basketball games. Now, because now you're going to have your two of your previous softball state champions are in this conference now in East Wilkes and West Wilkes together. So it makes sense on every level.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's going to be a great set of kind of rivalry matchups and good matchups for Gates. There's going to be some nice crowds at these Friday nights this fall. So looking forward to seeing just some of the pictures of the crowds, frankly, when these games are happening. But let's get into the football a little bit. So I had this conversation with Deana earlier. We kind of think that the 2As, East Wilkes and Starmount, might be the favorites in this conference, which has 3As and 4As in it. I think you're on the same page with that as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no way you cannot look at this conference preseason and not pick either Starmount or East Wilkes as the favorite. They are the two top teams going into 2025. And I know Deana hit on Starmount pretty good when you talked with her, but East Wilkes returns a starting offensive line, not to mention you've got Reese Dobbins, also Austin Nash, Aiden Gesford, all to lead this running back room, and a junior quarterback in Holden Spicer, who these guys were all together for a relay state championship team back in the spring. Like, this is an East Wilkes team that is athletic, that is fast, and anytime in their option style offense that you can bring your offensive line back, that is such a key thing to have, because they are solid up front, very strong in the weight room. They're not going to blow you away, I don't believe, from a size perspective, but what they may lack in overall size, they make up for with agility, strength, being able to get off the line of scrimmage, get off blocks. Like, this is a talented East Wilkes football team.
Yeah, it's whenever that game happens. When's that game happening? Do you know the top of your head?
I believe it is. I know it's in October. I think it's in October, because I know East opens up with North Wilkes in conference play, so it's in October.
I'll ask you this: what's the thing that you want to see East Wilkes improve from last year into this year to kind of really figure out, how can we kind of get to that next level?
I'm curious to see pass defense wise, when they start to play teams that really like to pass the football. I'm curious to see how the pass defense holds up. They're going to get a good testing conference with Ashe County, and I know we're going to hit on them in just a few minutes here. They run that air raid offense up in West Jefferson, so that's going to be a good test. I'm just curious to see the defensive backfield. I'm curious to see how that looks this year.
Okay, got you. And yes, that East Wilkes Starmount game is at Starmount, October 3rd. And we're in agreement. We're expecting this one to be the de facto conference championship when it happens. Obviously, anything can happen after that. There could be, unfortunately, devastating things that happen to either team after that. So it's not set in stone for sure, but likely that's going to be the conference championship game. I have to ask you this: if these two are the clear favorites, who else in this conference do you think has the upside to work themselves into that top tier?
You and I talked about this when I had you on my podcast, and I've talked about this with other people. Allegheny is my dark horse to watch out for in this league. I just think what Coach Zach Bennett's putting together now in his second season, taking over in Sparta, I think the Trojans are going to have something to say. They played East Wilkes close a season ago. That was a dogfight there. I just think this team has more talent than people are going to give them credit for on the preseason perspective. They return quarterback John LeMasters, and it's always key when you can bring your quarterback back. They also have 3 really good running backs as well. They got an all-conference kid in Damon Davis from a season ago that comes back. Alexis Nuevo is a bell cow back. Aiden Love, another one of those bell cow backs that Allegheny has. And Coach Bennett has said himself, we have more speed than I think I've ever seen at Allegheny. And the way they'll run the football, it's going to come down. I think their X factor for Allegheny at what makes or breaks what they do this year is how well these new pieces on the offensive line mesh and come together. If that offensive line where they're replacing a lot of guys, because they lost a lot of key guys on that offensive line, if these guys step up, come together and make a really solid unit up front between LeMasters, between Davis, Nuevo, and Love, Allegheny is going to be a challenge every single Friday night.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on the Trojans this year. I always found it funny that they're the Trojans, but they're in Sparta.
I know Allegheny Spartans does, Spartans does when you think about it being in Sparta, but yeah, it's they're definitely the team that I think a lot of the other coaches are thinking about as well. But again, there's another team that I'm very curious about. And that's Wilkes Central. Wilkes Central is a team, traditionally, when you want to find athletes in Wilkes County, you look in Moravian Falls. That's traditionally where they've been. They had some success on the JV level last year. Coach Chuck Cannon is, put a lot of those sophomores up to the varsity level. I'm very curious to see. They're going to be young, but when you've got athletes, sometimes you can overcome youth when you can out-athlete people, especially in our area here. But I'm very curious to see what Wilkes Central brings to the table, and honestly, also West Wilkes as well. They're another team. They've made strides under Coach Scotty Green since he has took this program over. They finally got over the big hump of beating Wilkes Central a season ago, something that had not been done since 2006 in football. And West Wilkes does lose their quarterback in Cannon Carpenter from last year, who done some really impressive things passing the football. But they also bring up a kid in Holden Gentry who can get the job done. This is a tough young man. He can read well. He does a lot of good things. And the kids will see him as a leader. He will step right in and be just fine as a leader for the Blackhawks. So West Wilkes they've still got some playmakers too. I think the middle of this conference is as tight as I can see it because, we talk about Starmount and East Wilkes at the top. Well, that middle portion of Allegheny, West Wilkes, Wilkes Central, and then Ashe County right there in the very middle of this conference, it's just moving pieces. It's really going to come down to those head-to-head matchups between those 4 schools in the middle of this league. The middle of this league is so close. It's hard to pick 3, 4, 5, and 6 in this league.
And the funny thing is, usually that means it's just going to come down to whichever way the ball bounces in some of these games. There's a lot of, funky things happen in football that kind of determine outcomes. So I could definitely see that. You're definitely right that this middle tier seems very close. So this West Wilkes Central rematch, I'm going to call it from last year. It's actually the first conference game. It's on September 19th. I can tell you that atmosphere there is going to be pretty electric because obviously you have West Wilkes off the high of last year, and then Wilkes Central is probably not too happy about having the streak snapped last year. So that's going to be a pretty intense atmosphere over there in Wilkes Central. Yeah,
Moravian Falls will be rocking that first conference game simply because it's like you said, for Wilkes Central, you're coming up, those kids that are coming back that didn't graduate, they're coming back with the thought process of we were the ones that the streak ended on. We didn't keep it going. We're the ones that lost it. And if you're West Wilkes, you're coming into it with the monkeys off our backs now. We don't have to hear about 2006 anymore. It is literally a thing of the past. And they're looking to take that next step as a program and qualify possibly for a playoff bid at the 3A level out of this league. I know making the playoffs is the next step that the West Wilkes program wants to make, something that it's been a while since the Blackhawks have been able to go to the playoffs, and that is a goal that they do have. And I just think, I've always been a proponent of your biggest rival at the end of the season, but I understand why they're doing it, first game of conference, because the Mountain Valley kind of got into an idea of doing that the last few years of the league back before this past realignment cycle that we just finished. But it is going to be rocking in Moravian Falls that night.
Yeah, that's going to be quite an atmosphere. And I'm sure you'll probably be at that one, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
So Ashe County, you kind of hit on them a little bit. For anyone that hasn't seen Ashe County play, what you have to know is that they do not play the same way as pretty much any other team in the area. They are full-on air raid. They barely run the ball. It's like, I can only know how many passing attempts they average per game. But so the interesting thing about them this year is the quarterback, Bryce Peters, is back to run the offense. But pretty much all of his receivers are gone. So I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on them because on one hand, you always like having a returning senior quarterback who has been productive. On the other hand, it's those guys helping them out.
Well, this is an Ashe County team after being in the Northwestern 3A, 4A, the previous realignment cycle. They've had success in the Mountain Valley Athletic Conference. As a matter of fact, they are on a three-peat of MVAC titles. They won them in 18, 19, and then the spring COVID season in 21. They've had success in this iteration of the conference. Now, Bryce Peters, as you mentioned, he comes back through for just under 3,000 yards last year, but he completed 64% of his passes, which I think is a great number that a lot of coaches will take when you're completing 64% of your passes. And that wide receiver room, that's the big one that I'm curious to see because Grable graduates from last year. He was a big-time playmaker at receiver for them last year, but Cole Treva, Jackson Dillard are two of the names to watch. When I talked with Coach Hampton in our preseason interview, he's high on those two guys to really step up and contribute in the wide receiver room. There's also a kid who, outside of West Jefferson, people may not have heard his name yet, in Taven Trivet, who they're expecting big things from. He was injured before week 1 last year, did not get to play his junior season, missed the whole year. They think he can do some really good things at receiver, and they do return a good number of their guys up front. Coach Hampton said it to me, he said, it's rare that we are as experienced, it feels like, returning up front as they are. If you get a good returning offensive line that is used to pass blocking the way they do, you have your quarterback back. If these receivers step up, this is an Ashe County team that can very easily make noise in year 1 in the Mountain Valley Athletic Conference. And I'll also throw this out. Riley Estes, Wyatt Little, Cameron Krause, those three guys lead the running back room. I know running back feels like a position that you don't mention when you talk about Ashe County as much, but they are used as weapons in the passing game as well. Offensive coordinator Drew Piscopo does an amazing job at scheming up an offense at, just using these running backs in the screen game, little dump off passes, draw plays, things of that nature. They're going to be contributing factors as well. Ashe County is another team you're going to have to they bring such a unique skill set versus everybody else in the league. They are a tough scheme for every Friday night in conference play.
Yeah, I think you hit on the head. The Northwest 3A or Northwestern 3A 4A they were in previously, just not great step for them, and that's evidenced by the fact that they're 4A now, and then those schools are 6As now. So that it kind of just shows you kind of difference in size they had there. They started out 4-2 last year, then ended on a 4-game losing streak. I do think that probably the main focus for them was probably just getting that defense a little bit tightened up. They gave up 30 and a half points per game last year, but that just might come naturally if you're not playing the Wataugas of the world anymore. So we'll have to see what it looks like. And honestly, the more we talked about it, the more I'm thinking like I view them in the same kind of vein as Allegheny, where I could see a scenario in which they end up somehow in the top two in the conference.
Oh, absolutely. I think Ashe County is one of those they can very easily work their way into that top two of the conference because again, I think they're going to be the caliber where they could beat anybody on any given night simply because what they do you don't see a lot of unless you schedule one or two pass heavy teams in non-conference to help you for when you see Ashe County later on in the year. It makes it tough because so many of these offenses in this league are ground-based teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we're both probably in agreement that there's going to be a bottom tier of this conference between Elkin and North Wilkes. Do you have any notes on those two teams?
I think it's one of those things where I think just by default, they kind of fall in that realm. North Wilkes, you don't really know what you're going to get with North Wilkes this year. Coach Wotecki does have his screen and pass game offense to spread it out and throw the ball all over the field a little bit at times. Easier said than done. Sometimes I feel like that comes easier at a school like Ashe County than it does at a school like North Wilkes. And then Elkin is one of those schools where Coach Brad Baker in his second year, they're just young. They're really like a lot of their youth, and I know he's going to try to keep those young guys down together at JV. There's still some talent here and there on the varsity level, but I think it may be a year or two before you see Elkin coming back up into the upper end of the league. I just think they're just going to have to build. Elkin is such a small school. We know what the numbers, are like in that area. I mean, for years when it was 1A through 4A, and when we subdivided the playoffs, Elkin was small 1A. So you know what the numbers are like there with Elkin, but I think, that they may be a year or two away from being at the top end of this conference to compete for it. And I think it's not really because I think they're going to be that bad. I think it's just because the mid to upper portion of this league is just going to be really good, as we've talked about. With Starmount and East Wilkes, then you throw in the Allegheny and the Ashe County. Like, it makes it tough to crawl into the upper ends of this league.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to see this one play out. I'm going to make you make a pick, though. I'm going to make you put in stone right now. Who are you taking to win this conference?
I've thought about this a lot because I thought this may be a question that we get to. And I'll be honest with you. And maybe it's because if I don't make this pick, my fiance is liable to, get me in some way, shape, or form because she is a Cardinal graduate. She was a softball player at East Wilkes, but I'm going with East Wilkes to win the conference. I think this is the year they do it. They've got the pieces. They've got the coach and Coach Travis Walker, who's done a phenomenal job. And I just think East Wilkes Starmount game I'm so on edge for because I'm so glad it falls before my wedding date because I would be distraught if I was on a cruise in the middle of the ocean and could not keep up with East Wilkes Starmount. So I'm glad it falls before our wedding date in October, but because I can't wait for that game either. But if I'm going to pick, I'm going to go with East Wilkes. I think they get it done this year, and I think they, in the first year of the rebirth of the MVAC, I think they claim the conference championship. But I think it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be tough. There's no nights off, really, in this league. And now that I say that, I could get my prediction blown to pieces, but hey, that's what we do in our line of work. We got to make predictions.
It's fun though. It's fun.
Oh, it's absolutely fun. It's part of the reason why we do what we do is to be able to make predictions like this. But and so, I know Deana, she's, Starmount through and through. So when you talk to her, I know that she would think Starmount, and that's part of the fun of all this. Yeah. And again, I think it's going to be really close. I would not be surprised if that Starmount East Wilkes game ended up being a 38-35, just absolute barn burner of a matchup, something of that realm, because I think when you're possibly playing for a conference championship, you're going to get the best both teams have to offer.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that one. Before we go, I want to give you a chance to, if you have any big, 5,000 foot view takes on the other conferences around. So that you have the Northwest 3A, 4A, which has Mount Airy, East Surrey in them, and also the Northwestern 6A, 7A. Do you have any kind of big picture takes on those two conferences?
Until you beat Mount Airy, I'm still going Mount Airy. Again, as Ric Flair said, to be the man, you've got to beat the man. Somebody's going to have to knock Mount Airy off before I think Mount Airy's not going to win that conference. But I do think West Stokes and East Surrey both make good cases. Those are going to be some incredible games in that Northwest 3A, 4A conference. North Surrey still has talent as well. Coach Fortner, I'm giving him a couple of years to build that Surrey Central program the way he wants to. I do think he is the right guy for the job. But when you take over a program that graduated 16 seniors last year at Surrey Central, and most of your numbers and depth is in your freshman class, and he told me point blank, he said, I'm not pulling them up. He said, we're leaving them down. He said, we got to do what we got to do. And that's big picture view for him, which I tip my hat to him for doing that over at Surrey Central. And then also, I think Logan Holder's a great hire at Forbush, the son of Kelly Holder, the former Mount Airy head coach and state champion. I think he's going to have Forbush going in the right direction. Will it happen immediately? Will it take a year or two? That's kind of the question, that's to be seen there. And then you turn to that Northwest 6A, 7A. I'm stoked about this. You and I talked about this when I had you on my podcast. Again, kind of the same deal with Mount Airy as Watauga. To be the man, you've got to beat the man. And Watauga hasn't lost a conference game since before COVID. So we'll see if that comes to an end this year.
The scoreboard guys are picking Freedom.
Well, and see, I've talked with David Jones a lot. He's a great friend of mine. It's a dude that I have a lot of respect for and a lot of love for. We're pretty good buddies. And if anybody is equipped to do it, I think it is Freedom, because Coach J.K. Atkins does such a phenomenal job at what he does. I think Freedom is the team to look out for, but do not sleep on the boys in Taylorsville. Alexander Central, Coach Chris Marshall, I think they're going to have something to say. I really do. With Sawyer Chapman-Mays coming back at tailback, you'll see him make an impact on offense and defense. They're about 5 deep, as Coach Marshall told me, at running back. So anytime that you can put a caliber running back and go 5 deep, he literally told me, he said, I feel good starting any of the 5 and letting them all play in the course of a game. If you can have a 5-man running back rotation in a game and feel confident at what they can do, you can keep guys fresh that way. And so I think Alexander Central is going to have something to say in that league as well. But again, Watauga go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to point out their JV team last year, 7-2. They beat Watauga by 12. They destroyed Freedom by 35 points. They crushed South Caldwell 56-0. They beat Highbrain 51-13. They lost 2 games. One was to Burns by 1 point. The other one was to Statesville in week 1 by 10 points. I know a lot of people don't put stock in JV, but that is something I'm very tuned in on, is Alexander Central, the kids coming up from that JV team.
Listen, in the past decade plus, Alexander Central, if you could ever have a JV dynasty, it's been then. They have had some phenomenal JV teams over the last 10 years or so. It hasn't always translated to the varsity level, and that's something Coach Chris Marshall said we have got to, just because we have success on JV, we've got to make it pay off at the varsity level when they make that step up. And that's, I think, one of their goals for this year. And then again, as I was going to say with Watauga, yes, Maddox Green is gone, but I promise you the cupboard is still not bare in Boone, North Carolina. Cade Keller is a kid that is going to be a good quarterback. People haven't seen him play a lot, of quarterback especially, at the varsity level because Maddox Green was there. But as Coach Hobbick told me, this is a kid that was taking his fair share of reps in practice every day the last couple of years, that, he was always ready. If something would have happened with Maddox, he was ready to step in and run the offense the same way. Like, Watauga's still going to be Watauga because they have established the culture of winning in Boone under Coach Ryan Hobbick. And once you have that culture established and the winning aspect just flows through your DNA, it's tough for it. What Watauga may see as a down season may be a successful season for 90% of the other schools.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad we got some Northwest Northwest 6A 7A talk in there as well. Aikman, I think that about covers it for your area. Again, could you give people kind of a guide to where they can find your work and your podcast and social media?
Absolutely. Again, you can find me on X, Twitter at Radio Guy AC. You can search Blue Ridge Football Podcast on Google or any search engine that you use, and you can literally get the podcasts, Apple, Spotify, etc., wherever you can find a podcast. It's on Facebook as well, that you can follow with all the updates on it there as well. That's where I put a lot of the content out first, is through the podcast Facebook page. So yeah, pretty easy to find, pretty simple to keep up with. Again, Joel, thank you so much. Looking forward to contributing with you on Friday nights this year on the post-game show. Looking forward to, helping with some recap articles and stuff like that from games that I'm going to go and watch and cover and keep up with. It's here. It's finally here with week 1, and I'm stoked. I cannot wait for this East Wilkes High Brighton game on Friday night.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you as always, and best of luck out there on Friday night as well.
Thank you.